Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a world's finest collaboration between myself and Michael K Vaughan, in which we combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we've wasted our youths. And since I horned my way in originally, years ago, to a feature on Mike's channel, and just said, I like this, I want to do it, he gets to pick what we talk about every week, and that can sometimes be disastrous. But not this week. Not this week. This week he picked something incredible, something I wasn't really aware that he liked. I love it. I've mentioned it many times before on this channel. And it's going to relieve you of the necessity of hearing me go on and on about the evils of modern comic books, because the thing we're picking today on Epic Comic Book Wednesday predates comic books. We're talking about Prince Valiant, which came out a year before Superman. So no superhero comics, no comics of any kind, and it didn't come out in a comic book. It came out in a newsprint, in newspapers. Those of you who were born in the 21st century will have no conception of the universal consumption of newspapers before the internet. It was astonishing. And one of the little Baroque touches to that massive consumption of newspapers, we're talking 2 or 3 editions of several newspapers in your town every day. One of the little Baroque features of that was the color comics, which could be incredible. They are, I believe, now a dead art form. But once upon a time, people did amazing things in those pages. At the time, in the mid to late 30s, a writer and artist named Hal Foster was doing great work on a Tarzan newspaper strip. And he was doing it fast, too. So he was well ahead. He had a cushion of columns, of pieces that he could rest on. That he had an idea of his own for something else, for a new feature. And eventually he switched from Tarzan to that new feature. And that new feature was Prince Valiant, the adventures of a young boy in King Arthur's court. We meet Valiant when he and his family are fleeing from their father. His father is a king, and they're fleeing from their enemies. So we start Val's adventures when he's a little kid. He is, as his name would imply, brave. He is bright and clean of limb. He is happy, except, when he's being tortured or when he's grieving the loss of a loved one. He is a generally clean, optimistic, can-do, hands-on, upbeat character. And as you might imagine, newspaper reading audiences getting that in the middle of the Great Depression, it took off like crazy. People loved it. Absolutely loved it. I believe mostly in those early strips, they loved it just because Val is such a breath of fresh air. He's always a breath of fresh air. If there's a long voyage, a sea voyage, he will sing to help the rowers. If there's a battle to be fought, he'll be right there in the front of it, sometimes alone. If there's a questionable character, someone in the strip who's brutish or angry, Val will befriend them and make them better people. It's a little bit cheesy. It's a little bit corny. It's also a little bit confectiony because although Hal Foster did a lot of research about antique styles of architecture or masonry or weaponry, he wasn't all that careful with what he was pulling from which period. This is, of course, King Arthur never existed, and this is a weird fantasy version of ye olden times England. It works. It absolutely works, mainly thanks to the visuals. The strip starts off with, the daily strip was just 3 panels, and you got that 5 days a week. But then you got a big opulent spread on Sunday, which would typically have a few little panels and then one big display, one showcase panel, and that would move the action forward. This was, like I said, this was before comic books, so there aren't any word balloons here. There are captions, and the captions to the artwork sometimes have dialogue, but you're not getting inside anyone's head or any exclamation points of their speech to other people in bubbles or anything like that. And Foster believed, he always used to say, that the most important space in a multi-panel newspaper comic strip is the white bars between the panels. And what he meant by that is that that's when action happens. That's when things happen. his artwork is it's very often not strictly sequential. He is rather giving you scenes that you will build, that you will bead together into a narrative. And it works wonderfully. I might not always agree with a lot of especially how Foster treated his fellow professional artists. It was oftentimes a little bit grudging, or even a lot grudging. I mean, his successor on Tarzan was Bernie Hogarth, and he went to his grave saying, he's okay, I guess, not particularly good. But on Prince Valiant, he started out with smaller panels and did not initially reveal how great he could be. Like, for instance, at one point, young Val and a friend of his encounter an actual monster in the fens. There's one of the nice things about having this digitally is that you can zoom in on the incredible amounts of detail that Foster worked in. He was working on a gigantic board. But in a comic book, a lot of that detail will be lost. Although I should say that Fantagraphics has done amazing work, not only at reprinting these things at about the size or a little bit bigger than they would have appeared in your Sunday paper, but also cleaning them up. I wrote a piece about this. They clean these things up beautifully. But you see, they encounter an actual monster, an animal that does not exist in prehistoric England. That's neat. Little details like that are neat. That doesn't always happen. And it gets less and less rare as Val becomes more and more. See there, he's fighting a giant turtle. A giant turtle. The likes that had not been seen in Britain since, millions of years before this would have happened. And you occasionally, in these very earliest strips, you get a hint of what Foster can do with a big panoramic panel. But the full genius of what he could do with that kind of artwork became apparent. I've shown this to you before, but I will page down to get to it. They also fight a giant crocodile. Look at this thing. Look at this visual. It's like 50 feet long. That is just incredible. Look at that. That is just incredible. And notice also everything else that's going on here. You have the tail of this crocodile is partially obscured by shrubbery. That's to enhance the sense of its size. He has decided that he will not give you any details about these figures. They are just black shadows on a hill, very colorful clouds in the background, a glimpse of the sea, wonderfully done. But there came a storyline. See, here's the Val that we get in these early strips. He is just a little boy. He grows up as the series goes on. He becomes a father, becomes a man. But there's one scene where he is fighting a horde of enemy soldiers with just the singing sword in his hand, and it's incredible. Let me page down to it here. See, you get big panoramic stuff like this. This is a glimpse of the weird, Hollywood Camelot that Foster created. But there's one particular scene, where Val is fighting, and we see in this scene pretty much a perfect illustration of the pinnacle of this art. Really, the essential unfollowability of Hal Foster at doing this kind of thing. A little bit on the unfair side, because no one else really comes close to it. And this panel rightly became absolutely iconic. This is... I can only imagine what Sunday paper readers would have felt getting this thing, getting a panel like this. This is the panel I'm talking about, and that is just amazing. All the stuff that's happening there is just amazing. Foster literally forgets no detail. It's just incredible. And you notice Val's theme is largely blue with a red cape. Everybody paid attention to this. Everybody in the industry at the time, these kinds of operatic newspaper comic books were a big deal. Their practitioners were well known. They had an audience of millions. Another element that actually Mike joked about this in a Voxer message to me that does come up often in Prince Valiant. How to put this? Semi-nudity. comes up a lot, or outright nudity. Foster had this idea of a pure world where he had this idea of clean-limbed masculinity. Val is often seen struggling or even happy with little or no clothes on. You see, there he is singing. Look at this panel. How incredible. Let's get the long, wise view of this. Just amazing. That is just amazing. And that's it. Prince Valiant is still going on. The strip is still going on. Val is just getting older, and we're following a million adventures of his. Hal Foster eventually left. He couldn't do it anymore. At first he distrusted his eye for the artwork, and then he started to not have the energy to do the scripting either. So he handed it off to another writer and another artist, and his son. The son wrote a very good book about this whole world of great newspaper comics, and it's gone on from there to a number of different artists. One of the great things about the Prince Valiant newspaper strip is that it's been blessed with the same kind of unfailing good luck that its signature character has, in that it's one really terrific artist after another. Now, granted, they're working on a strong template. They want the artwork to resemble the visual templates that Foster originally came up with, but still, a big, fat omnibus volume of Prince Valiant, which Fantagraphics I don't think has ever done. Michael K Vaughan would know better than I whether or not that's true. They've done innumerable tall, thin paperbacks of individual years of Prince Valiant, but I don't think there's ever been a big volume. I wish there were. That would be great. Especially if it was done from their cleaned up new prints. Those new prints really make a difference. Because the Prince Valiant comic, when Foster was doing it, he was heavy on the inking sometimes, so the details get lost. These things are almost 100 years old. The folks at Fantagraphics did a great job of cleaning that all up and making it look just like it would have looked to you when you got it on the newsstand, or better. So that is our Epic Comic Book Wednesday for today. It's Prince Valiant, who I have loved forever. I have loved this comic strip forever. I guess that it counts for Epic Comic Book Wednesday, but if I love this so much, I shudder to think what might be coming down the line. I know I've said that the last few weeks, and Mike has pleased me, but there was talk, not that long ago, of a certain Marvel character. Let's just say it rhymes with spoon fight. I was not looking forward to that at all. Although you were, probably. But who knows? We'll know. We'll see what we get next week. I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.